Hi, fans of high-quality entertainment. I did a recent video talking about 100 albums from the 70s and how many of the albums in the list I had heard. And I'm doing the very same for albums from the 60s. And I've already tallied up how many albums I've heard. And we'll just go through the list. And I hope that, some of my viewers will add up the albums here and let me know in the comment section below how many of these albums you've heard at least once in your life, even if you don't remember them, today. Like there's a couple of albums I know I have heard, not that I remember them that well. So here we go. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. I think that might be the album I've listened to the most in my life when I really think about it. Pet Sounds, of course, I love. Highway 61 I've heard. So I've heard all of these albums in the top 10, except for Cream. Although I've probably heard all of the songs on this. How do you say it? Disraeli Gears. Disraeli Gears. It's not every day I say Disraeli. Okay, Van Morrison is an excellent album, and I've got that, and I've got that. I've never heard Mr. Tambourine Man, the album. I've got Days of Future Past and the Village Green Preservation Society, excellent albums. I've heard Love Forever Changes, good album. I love Hot Rats. In-a-gadda-da-vida is great. Everybody knows This Is Nowhere I've heard. Blind Faith, one of my all-time favorite albums. I've heard the debut album from Santana. I've heard The Zombies, Odyssey, and Oracle, great album. I've heard The Stooges. Bookends is awesome. I have not heard Buffalo Springfield Again, like the whole album. I've heard SF Soar. I've got that. It's great. I've never heard The Gilded Palace of Sin. I've heard Chicago Transit Authority. I've heard their first few albums. Stand Up by Jethro Tull, I've heard. I've never listened to If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears by Mamas and Papas. Of course, Pink Floyd, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn is excellent. I've got that. And Truth, Throat Mass Replica. I have never heard all of John Mayall's Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton. I have heard Traffic and their album Mr. Fantasy. I've got the debut album by Steppenwolf. I've got their box set of all their early albums, which are all excellent. Of course, I'm a big CCR fan, so I've heard that. I've heard Roger the Engineer, but I didn't really care for it that much. I have not heard the debut album Moby Grape. I have not heard all of Blood, Sweat, and Tears, except for the hit singles from it. I've never been a fan of Vanilla Fudge, but I've heard of them, and I've never heard that album. I've heard Anthem of the Sun. That was pretty good. I love Joe Cocker. I've got that. That's a great album. Shades of Deep Purple. Not a fan of Blue Cheer. I have not heard Elvis is Back or Bo Diddley is a Gunslinger. I've got the box set for all the early Spirit albums, so I've got that. That is excellent. I've heard of It's a Beautiful Day and a couple of their songs, but I don't think I've ever heard their album. I have not listened to the Allman Brothers Band, their debut. I've heard Electric Music for the Mind and Soul. I love Small Faces, Ogden's Nut Gone Flake. Haven't heard In Dreams. I've got that. also known as the Red Album. I've never listened to Green Onions. I'm a big fan of the Velvet Underground. I've not heard the debut album, The Animals, or the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. I love Donovan, as some of you know, so I've got that. I've never heard all of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac or Janis Joplin. I got them Old Cosmic Blues Again, Mama. So these I haven't heard, but of course I love Space Oddity by David Bowie. That's great. Nilsson, I've heard this Aerial Ballet. I haven't listened to The Soft Machine. I've heard Gris Gris by Dr. John. I've heard Joni Mitchell Clouds. Can Monster Movie. I love one of my all-time favorite albums and bands. What else here? Not much. Yeah, the Monkees, of course. I have not heard Evolution by the Hollies. And I would like to hear the Battle of the Bands by the Turtles, but I haven't heard the whole album. And I've got Procol Harum, their debut. I haven't heard the debut of the Amboy Dukes. I've heard Wheatfield Soul. I have not heard all of Three Dog Night's debut. I'm gonna have to move this up here. There we go. Have not heard the album Crimson and Clover. I think I've heard The Spirit of 67 by Paul Revere and the Raiders. Yep. Canned Heat. I've got this album, Boogie with Canned Heat. It's excellent. I've got Groovin'. I've got the Rascals box set of all their early albums. And the last one that I've heard is Sly and the Family Stone Stand. So in total, I have heard 52 out of the 100, which is kind of, I'm sure some of my viewers have heard a lot more than 52, but, you know, it's over half. So, and, you know, some of these albums I know I wouldn't be interested in hearing. And some, you know, some other ones I would, like Mr. Tambourine Man. And yeah, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band. Could be interesting to hear. But that is it. I am curious. In the comment section below, let me know how many of these you have heard at least once. I've heard 52. Try and beat that. I'm sure somebody will. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Please remember to like the video, leave a comment below, and make sure you're subscribed. Bye.